The Philippines expresses its serious concern over the increasing tensions between Israel and Iran. We urge all parties to refrain from escalating the situation and to work towards a peaceful resolution of their conflict. The Philippines has long advocated for all states to adhere to the principles of international law and to the peaceful settlement of disputes. In line with our commitment to peace and stability in the region, the Philippines reaffirms its support for a two-state solution. We believe that Israelis and Palestinians deserve a common future where their rights, aspirations, and security are upheld. We thus urge all parties to refrain from unilateral actions that undermine the prospects for a peaceful resolution to the conflict and endanger the life and livelihood of citizens and migrants alike. The dire situation in Gaza demands immediate attention. With over 90% of the population facing food insecurity and critical shortages of electricity and water, the suffering of innocent civilians is intolerable. The scale of displacement and destruction of homes and schools is alarming, threatening the future of an entire generation. We stand in solidarity with the affected communities and emphasize the imperative of providing life-saving humanitarian assistance to alleviate their plight. We call for the protection and safety of civilian seafarers passing through the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, and the Gulf of Aden, and other contiguous areas, not only to ensure free flow of commerce, but also to safeguard innocent lives. Protecting the rights and welfare of seafarers is a key priority for the Philippine government. In this regard, we seek the support of the international community to spare no efforts to have them released and returned home as soon as possible. We reiterate the belief that the interrelated conflicts in the region should be resolved through diplomacy and adherence to international law, leading to free and unimpeded commerce and freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. The Philippines welcomes and recognizes the paramount significance of UN Security Council Resolution 2728, which addresses the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The ongoing humanitarian crisis demands swift and unified action from the international community. In this regard, we urge all parties to fully implement UNSC Resolution 2728 without delay in order to alleviate the suffering of innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. To date, the situation in Gaza remains dire. Tens of thousands have died and millions are displaced. The Philippines is one with the international community in calling for lasting, sustainable ceasefire, the safe release of all hostages, and the unhindered delivery of humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. Furthermore, we reiterate our firm support for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, and urge the international community to provide sufficient and predictable funding to ensure the continuity of its vital humanitarian work and development work, including on education. Madam President, the enduring Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains a pivotal determinant for the peace and stability in the Middle East. Recent exchanges between Iran and Israel further exacerbates the tension and threaten to accelerate the spiral of violence in the region. The Philippines ardently urges all parties to elevate dialogue as a primary tool for a peaceful and lasting resolution. We strongly advocate for diplomacy to prevail in resolving differences. The Philippines stands ready to support efforts aimed at achieving a comprehensive and lasting peace in the Middle East. More than ever, the Philippines emphasizes the importance of upholding the UN Charter, international law, and relevant UN resolutions as the foundation for a just and peaceful resolution of the Palestinian question. We call on the international community to redouble its efforts to promote dialogue, de-escalate tensions, and work towards a future of peaceful coexistence of the populations of Israel and Palestine for the peace, stability, and prosperity of the Middle East. Thank you, Madam President.
Philip, South Africa.
Thank you, Madam President, and we'd like to thank Malta for convening this quarterly open debate on the situation in the Middle East and providing all UN member states the opportunity to address the Council on developments in the region. South Africa aligns itself with the statement to be delivered by the Republic of Uganda on behalf of the non-aligned movement. Madam President, it's been 6 months since the current war in Gaza began on 7 October last year. Almost 34,000 people have been killed, of which almost 14,000 have been children. Thousands have been displaced and are at risk of famine. Developments in the Middle East following the retaliatory action by the Islamic Republic of Iran against Israel, following Israel's attack on Iran's embassy in Damascus, are of great concern to South Africa. Clearly, there is a very real danger of a devastating region-wide escalation. All parties must exercise their utmost restraint and avoid any act that would escalate tensions, particularly in this fragile region. South Africa has continuously stressed that irrespective of whether states believe that their use of force is lawful, it is never wise to resort to war, as inevitably it's ordinary people who bear the brunt of the conflict. The international community and the United Nations Security Council in particular must act in the pursuit of sustainable and just peace for all people. Madam President, the Security Council, as a body responsible for the maintenance of international peace and security, has convened numerous debates and has adopted several presidential statements and resolutions on matters pertaining to the protection of civilians. For example, Security Council Resolution 2417 calls on all parties to armed conflict to comply with their obligations under international humanitarian law. It underlines the importance of safe and unimpeded access of humanitarian personnel to civilians in armed conflict. It strongly condemns the use of starvation of civilians as a method of warfare and strongly condemns the unlawful denial of humanitarian access, of depriving civilians of objects that are indispensable to their survival, including willfully impeding relief, supply, and access for responses to conflict-induced food insecurity. It's not enough for us to sit, debate, agree on paper, but fail to act when we face the real-life manifestations of what Council members are committed to prevent, and that are the outcomes of these horrendous actions. The Security Council must take concrete steps to prevent gross humanitarian suffering in pursuant to its own commitments. Otherwise, why bother adopting statements and resolutions that would become meaningless should they be ignored? Madam President, nothing can justify the deliberate killing and injuring of civilians, as well as the use of famine against hopeless and traumatized civilians. No doubt, the entire population of Gaza is enduring destruction at a scale and speed without parallel in recent history. Nothing can justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. Thus, the ongoing historic injustice with decades of Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territory continues to pose a serious threat to regional and international peace and security. Madam President, it's been 3 weeks since the Security Council's adoption of Resolution 2728, demanding an immediate ceasefire. However, Israel continues its devastating attacks on the Palestinian people. The proliferation of global conflict will continue if we, as the international community, do not commit ourselves to the ending of war and the establishment of conditions under which justice and respect for international law are maintained. Madam President, as Palestine pursues its right to seek membership to the United Nations, the international community must avoid any retributive actions that could stifle the very existence of the state of Palestine. South Africa believes that the right of the Palestinian people to have their own fully independent state must be recognized by all, and the aspiration for membership of the UN should be supported. In closing, Madam President, acknowledging the legitimate concerns of all involved parties is a crucial step towards fostering stability and harmony in diversity. And let us remind ourselves that the central issue in the Middle East is the materialization of a two-state solution whereby Israel and Palestine can live together, side by side, in peace and security as two independent and sovereign states. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of South Africa and pass the floor to the representative of Bangladesh.
Madam President, we commend the Presidency of Malta for successfully steering the work of the Council in April 2024, and especially for convening this high-level open debate. We thank the Secretary General for his comprehensive briefing. My delegation aligns itself with the statements to be delivered by Uganda and Mauritania on behalf of the NAM and the OIC respectively. Madam President, in last 6 months, we have been repeatedly urging the Council and in the General Assembly for an immediate ceasefire to save the innocent civilians' lives in Gaza. However, the reality continues to be absolutely frustrating and unacceptable that the death toll is rising, people are dying in front of us, and we are here every time reporting the rising numbers, which has crossed 34,000 now. Even though this Council finally could adopt Resolution 2728 3 weeks ago, calling for an immediate ceasefire during the month of Ramadan, leading to a lasting, sustainable ceasefire, nothing has changed on the ground. Aggression and killing of innocent civilians by Israel continues. We are also nowadays being educated that Security Council resolutions are not binding. Madam President, we are witnessing continued, unabated and planned killings of civilians, unprecedented killings of UN staffs, humanitarian workers, destroying of hospitals and shelters, forced starvation, and blocking of humanitarian assistance while millions of people are in dire need of emergency life-saving assistances. But unfortunately, neither killing of civilians has been stopped, nor the life-saving assistances have been reached. The prospect of a negotiated ceasefire, despite repeated hopes, still remains elusive. Apart from the ongoing unhindered carnage in Gaza, we are also witnessing increasing violence by the Israeli forces and settlers against the Palestinians in the West Bank. Now, the question is what else we can do in the multilateral platform to stop this indiscriminate attack and killing of civilians, which are tantamount to genocide and crimes against humanity. Call of this Council is ignored and disregarded. Not only this Council, decisions of the General Assembly, the Human Rights Council, International Court of Justice, all are being blatantly disregarded by Israel and its allies. Madam President, we commend Malta as the current President of the Security Council for calling upon the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to expeditiously complete the ongoing investigation, which we fully support and echo. Bangladesh, in line with a strong value-based position against mass atrocity crimes, has been one of the 5 member states who referred the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories to the International Criminal Court in November 2023. We are also deeply concerned that Israel is not following the directives of the International Court of Justice. Today, we call upon all member states of the UN to abide by the recent Human Rights Council resolution calling for, among others, cessation of arms transfers to the occupying power. Madam President, we do not know what is actually pulling this Council back from accepting the State of Palestine as a member, as a full UN member, while overwhelming majority in the General Assembly voted for it, while almost all the members are supporting the two-state solutions. We strongly urge the Committee of the Admission of New Members to recommend admission of the State of Palestine as a member state of the United Nations. We call upon all members of this Council to unanimously support the resolution approving Palestine's full membership in the UN. Please note that we have overwhelming support in the General Assembly in favor of the full membership of the State of Palestine. Madam President, in a different note, Bangladesh strongly condemns the attack of 1st April 2024 on the consulate building of the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria. Bangladesh stresses that the principle of inviolability of diplomatic and consular premises and personnel must be respected in all cases. We are also deeply concerned over the current developments and serious escalation between Iran and Israel, which threatens peace and stability in the Middle East. We call upon all parties to work for avoiding any further escalation of conflict. We believe that the root cause of all past and present instability in the Middle East is the prolonged Israeli occupation of the Palestinian and Arab territories, its repeated aggression and atrocities in the occupied Palestinian territories, and its apartheid-like treatment of the Palestinian people. Regrettably, they are doing all this with total disregard of the international community in the form of numerous UN resolutions calling for the end of the occupation and the establishment of a Palestinian state, as envisaged in the two-state solution. Without solving this core issue, we cannot expect peace in the region. We also believe that supporting the two-state solution but opposing the full UN membership of the State of Palestine is surprisingly contradictory. Madam President, we once again urge this Council to take immediate measures to stop the Israeli atrocity in Gaza by taking all possible measures to implement Resolution 2728, and also to bring an end of decades of long Israeli occupation and aggression against Palestine. In this regard, we would like to reiterate that only solution of this crisis, the only way to establish peace in Palestine and the whole region, is to establish an independent, viable, and sovereign Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital under the two-state solution based on the pre-1967 borders, and granting the admission of the State of Palestine as member of the United Nations. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Bangladesh and pass the floor to the United Arab Emirates.
سيدة الرئيسة، أشكر معالي إيان بورغ على ترأسه هذه الجلسة ونهنئكم على تولي مالطا رئاسة المجلس هذا الشهر، والشكر موصول للأمين العام أنطونيو غوتيريش على مشاركته وبيانه الهام. كما أود أن أضم صوت دولة الإمارات للبيان الذي أدلت به المملكة العربية السعودية نيابة عن المجموعة العربية. سيدة الرئيسة، تدعو دولة الإمارات جميع أعضاء مجلس الأمن إلى التصويت لصالح مشروع القرار الذي يوصي بمنح فلسطين العضوية الكاملة في الأمم المتحدة. فحين اعتمدت الجمعية العامة القرار 1967 في العام 2012 معربة عن أملها بأن يستجيب مجلس الأمن لطلب فلسطين بالحصول على العضوية الكاملة، كان واضحاً تأييد غالبية الدول الأعضاء لهذا الطلب، وذلك لاستيفاء فلسطين الشروط المطلوبة. فما الذي ينتظره هذا المجلس لدعم هذا الطلب؟ لقد أثبتت فلسطين أنها عضواً فاعل في المجتمع الدولي، حيث يوجد 140 دولة تعترف بدولة فلسطين، ولفلسطين سجل حافل بالمواقف التي تؤكد على التزامها بميثاق الأمم المتحدة ودعم السلام، إلى جانب انضمامها للعديد من الاتفاقيات والمعاهدات الدولية. كما تطلع فلسطين بدور فاعل في المنظمات الإقليمية والدولية، وخاصة في الأمم المتحدة، ومثال ذلك ترأسها بنجاح مجموعة 77 والصين للعام 2019. وأكرر، ما الذي ينتظره هذا المجلس لدعم العضوية الكاملة لفلسطين؟ سيدة الرئيسة، لا يمكن فصل حديثنا حول العضوية الكاملة لفلسطين عن الالتزامات التاريخية للأمم المتحدة، وبالأخص هذا المجلس تجاه الشعب الفلسطيني. فقد التزمت هذه المنظمة حين اعتمدت الجمعية العامة قرار التقسيم 181 إنشاء دولتين في فلسطين، عربية ويهودية، وطلبت من مجلس الأمن اتخاذ الإجراءات اللازمة لتنفيذ هذا القرار. وفي حين تأسست الدولة الإسرائيلية بموجب القرار، لا يزال الشعب الفلسطيني ينتظر تأسيس دولته. إن منح فلسطين العضوية الكاملة يعد خطوة هامة لتعزيز جهود السلام، حيث سيؤكد بذلك المجتمع الدولي التزامه قولاً وفعلاً بحل الدولتين كسبيل وحيد لإنهاء الصراع الفلسطيني الإسرائيلي. لقد أثبتت الفترة الماضية أن اكتفاء المجتمع الدولي بإدارة هذا الصراع بدلاً من اتخاذ خطوات ملموسة للدفع نحو حله هو نهج عقيم. فها هي غزة اليوم تواجه حرباً دامية راح ضحيتها أكثر من 30,000 فيما يتعرض من بقي حياً للقصف والمجاعة والأمراض وخطر التهجير. وها هي الضفة الغربية شهدت بدورها عامين هما الأكثر دموية منذ عقدين بسبب استمرار إسرائيل في ممارساتها المجحفة بحق الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق. إن بقاء هذه الأوضاع على حالها لا ينبئ إلا باحتدام العنف وجر المنطقة إلى مستويات جديدة من عدم الاستقرار. وما يحدث من تصعيدات في المنطقة خاصة خلال الأسابيع الماضية يؤكد على ذلك. إن مواجهة تيار العنف والتصعيد يتطلب من المجتمع الدولي لا سيما مجلس الأمن اتخاذ خطوات مدروسة بدقة لإيصال المنطقة إلى بر الأمان. وكأولوية يجب إطفاء فتيل العنف من إرجاء الأرض الفلسطينية المحتلة وإنهاء التصعيد في المنطقة، بما يشمل التوصل إلى وقف فوري ودائم لإطلاق النار في قطاع غزة وإنقاذ أرواح الناس من الهلاك جوعاً ومواصلة الحوار والتفاوض والسبل الدبلوماسية لحل النزاعات سلمياً. كما يجب أن توقف إسرائيل جميع ممارساتها التصعيدية وغير الشرعية في الضفة الغربية والقدس الشرقية، وأن تضع حداً لعنف المستوطنين واعتداءاتهم المسلحة على القرى والمدن الفلسطينية كما حدث نهاية الأسبوع الماضي، مع محاسبة مرتكبي هذه الجرائم الخطيرة على أفعالهم. يجب أن نكون حازمين في مطالبتنا بضرورة التزام جميع الأطراف المعنية بالقانون الدولي بما في ذلك القانون الدولي الإنساني، وأن تتخذ كافة الخطوات اللازمة لتنفيذ قرارات مجلس الأمن وآخرها القرارات 27/12 و27/20 و27/28. ويعني ذلك السماح بدخول المساعدات الإنسانية عبر كافة المعابر المتوفرة وضمان توزيعها إلى وجهتها بأمان ودون عوائق، بما يشمل دعم جهود السيدة سيغريت كاغ كبيرة منسقي الشؤون الإنسانية في غزة. ولا بد أيضا من ضمان استمرار وكالة الأونروا في جهودها الإغاثية التي لا غنى عنها. كما يجب توفير الحماية للمدنيين والعاملين في المجال الإنساني وعدم استهداف المرافق المدنية وفي مقدمتها المنشآت الصحية. ونؤكد مجدداً على إدانتنا الشديدة لمقتل عدد كبير من موظفي الإغاثة الإنسانية بما في ذلك أثناء استهداف إسرائيل لقافلة تابعة للمطبخ المركزي العالمي، مما أثر بشكل كبير على العمليات الإنسانية في قطاع غزة. وأخيراً نشدد أن وقف جولات العنف المتكررة على نحو مستدام لن يكون ممكناً دون التوصل إلى حل عادل ودائم وشامل للصراع الفلسطيني الإسرائيلي وفقاً لخطة طريق قابلة للتنفيذ لحل الدولتين وضمان عودة الأطراف إلى عملية تفاوضية تكون جادة وذات مصداقية ضمن إطار زمني واضح. فهذا هو السبيل الوحيد لضمان أمن واستقرار وازدهار الشعبين الفلسطيني والإسرائيلي والمنطقة بأكملها. وشكرا سيدة الرئيسة.
I thank the representative of the United Arab Emirates. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Sheikh Nyang, Chair of the Committee of the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, I would like to congratulate Malta for assuming the presidency of the Security Council and for convening this meeting at ministerial level, elevating the Council's attention to the gravity of the prevailing crisis. I also extend my gratitude to the Secretary General for his briefing and tireless efforts toward achieving a just and lasting solution to the question of Palestine in accordance with international law and relevant UN resolutions. The Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People rejects linking the origin of the current crisis solely to the abhorrent attacks of 7 October 2023 inside Israel. The historical context, spanning over 76 years on the UN agenda, helps to understand the illegal Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, decades of documented human rights violation, grave breaches of international humanitarian law, and 17 years of blockade of the Gaza Strip. Addressing such issues is essential for a just and lasting solution to the question of Palestine, including the current catastrophic crisis in Gaza. Our committee welcomed the Security Council's belated adoption of Resolution 2728/2024, demanding an immediate ceasefire during the month of Ramadan, leading to a lasting, sustainable ceasefire. However, the committee deeply regrets that the resolution was not implemented. Ramadan is over, and thousands of Palestinian civilians continue to be killed and maimed. This must stop. Israel's war in Gaza has resulted in high civilian death among Palestinians, extensive displacement, denial of food and medicine as a weapon, plausible genocide, and consistent violations of international law, including disregarding ICJ orders. Blatant disrespect for international law undermines the UN and its authority, eroding the multilateral system and the Council's standing. In 6 months of this horrific war, the occupying powers' military operations have killed over 33,000 Palestinians and injured over 76,000, mostly women and children. Deliberate obstruction of humanitarian aid has plunged 1.1 million civilians into starvation, disease, and death. Gaza is today a victim of an openly admitted human-made famine. At the same time, Israel's occupying forces and Arab settlers continue to inflict violence and dispossession of the Palestinian population in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Since the start of 2024, according to the Israeli organization Peace Now, Israel's confiscation of Palestinian land and settlement expansion has grown massively compared to previous years. Israel's illegal settlement activities and its illegal occupation must stop. The committee commends the UN, member states, and NGOs for aid efforts in Gaza, while condemning Israel's deliberate attacks on humanitarian workers and infrastructure. We note that the disparity in attention devoted to these incidents, including the killing of 178 UNRWA and other staff, and the equally horrendous World Central Kitchen staff tragedy. We continue to demand unrestricted humanitarian access in Gaza. We also demand a stop to the targeting of journalists. Over 150 of them have been killed in Israeli attacks. Moreover, the international press must be allowed access to Gaza. The committee strongly denounces Israel's persistent efforts to undermine UNRWA, the only entity with the capacity to address the needs of civilians in Gaza. The committee opposes any attempts to shift the status of Palestinian refugees as per GA Resolution 194 of 1948. We must not let UNRWA collapse as the ramifications go beyond mere humanitarian concerns. It would threaten to ignite new flames of tension and conflict in an already volatile region. The committee urges donors to promptly resume funding UNRWA and to support the full implementation of its GA mandate. The committee welcomes the UN Human Rights Council resolutions of 5th April, urging, among other measures, to prevent forced transfers of Palestinians and halt arms sales to Israel. We acknowledge efforts by Egypt, Qatar, and the US towards achieving a permanent and sustainable ceasefire and the release of all hostages and hope for an agreement. We must strive for peace in Gaza to prevent escalating conflicts that threaten global security. The committee urgently calls for an immediate halt to Israel-Iran escalation emphasizing adherence by all to the UN Charter's principles. The committee urges the Security Council and member states to support the States of Palestine's application for UN membership. This crucial step will support the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and the realization of the two-state solution. We salute the ongoing efforts of the EU countries planning to join the 140 member states who already recognize the State of Palestine. We welcome the appointment of a new Prime Minister in Palestine to lead the government to help streamline recovery and reconstruction efforts. I conclude with a plea to all member states, including council members, to heed the calls of the GA, as well as civil society, civil servants, and citizens throughout the world who are clamoring daily for an end to the carnage in Gaza, accountability for egregious crimes committed by all parties, and for vigorous efforts to achieve a just, lasting solution to the question of Palestine. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Nyang for his statement. I pass the floor to the representative of Indonesia.
Thank you, Madam President. Indonesia appreciates Malta's strong leadership in continuously supporting the Palestinian cause. This chamber has often heard that peace in the Middle East will only be realized when Israel's occupation of Palestine ends, with the realization of a two-state solution. Today, the Council has the opportunity to move us closer towards this goal. Indonesia therefore commends Algeria for the draft resolution recommending for the full membership of the State of Palestine to the United Nations. This is a long overdue course of action to uphold justice, to help restart negotiation towards a two-state solution on equal footing, to give hope to the Palestinian people. How can we achieve lasting peace if Palestine is continuously denied its right to equal standing in peace negotiations? Indonesia therefore calls on all members of the Council to use your moral compass and support the resolution. Denying Palestine its rightful place in the UN will undermine the credibility of the multilateral system, perpetuate the cycle of violence, and render peace even more elusive. Madam President, Israeli-Palestinian conflict has endured for far too long. The current crisis in Gaza has cost over 34,000 lives and counting, with the majority being innocent women and children. The ICJ provisional measures stated Israel's attack on Gaza amounts to genocide. The Council must stop this catastrophe and pull the Middle East back from the brink of a wider regional conflict. We call on Council members to walk the talk, to ensure an immediate ceasefire, the scaling up and effective delivery of humanitarian assistance in Gaza, and implementation of all resolutions on the political settlement of the conflict. Madam President, let us not forget of the daily realities of millions of Palestinian refugees. A just and lasting peace must address their legitimate rights, including their rights of return. Until there is a final political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we must therefore double down on our support to UNRWA. UNRWA is a lifeline for millions of Palestinian refugees and a stabilizing force in the Middle East. We must ensure that UNRWA can fully implement its mandate. In closing, Indonesia challenges members of the Council to be on the right side of history. Let us embrace humanity over atrocity, diplomacy over discord, and dialogue over division. Together, we can pave the way for a future where peace prevails. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Indonesia. There are still a number of speakers remaining on my list for this meeting. I intend, with the concurrence of members of the Council, to suspend the meeting until next week. The meeting is suspended. The 9,609th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the admission of new members. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Israel to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. I propose that the Council invite the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine to the United Nations to participate in this meeting in accordance with the Provisional Rules of Procedure and the previous practice in this regard. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Item 2 on its agenda. In a letter dated 2nd April 2024, addressed to the Secretary-General, the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine referred to the application of the State of Palestine for membership in the United Nations contained in document S/2011/592, dated 23rd September 2011. The requested that renewed consideration be given to that application by the Security Council. The letter has been issued as document S/2024/286. The report of the Committee on the Admissions of New Members concerning the application of the State of Palestine for admission to membership in the United Nations has been issued as document S/2024/313. Members of the Council have before them document S/2024/312, the text of a draft resolution submitted by Algeria. The Council is ready to proceed to the vote on the draft resolution before it. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements before the vote. I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, Madam President. Before I deliver my statement, I would like to express my gratitude to you, Madam President, for organizing this meeting and also for your outstanding efforts in chairing our Council during this month. We truly value your hard work and personal commitment. Madam President, on behalf of my country, Algeria, on behalf of the Arab Group, on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, on behalf of the Non-Aligned Movement, and on behalf of countless other peace-loving countries, I stand before the highest organ entrusted with the maintenance of international peace and security to introduce the draft resolution on the admission of the State of Palestine to the United Nations. On November 15, 1988, my country, Algeria, was home of the declaration of the independence of the State of Palestine. Today, the call of history resounds once again, and it is my honor to put before the Council the recommendation to admit the State of Palestine as a full member of the United Nations. It is a critical step towards rectifying a long-standing injustice. Late Yasser Arafat, in his epic declarations proclaiming the state of Palestine, lamented then the exclusion of Palestinians from the international community. He said, and I quote, "At a time when the contemporary world was formulating its new value system, the balance of local and global power excluded the Palestinians from the common destiny. It became clear once again that justice alone does not move the wheel of history." End of quote. Today, we strive to answer Yasser Arafat's call by urging our colleague in the Security Council to vote in favor of admitting Palestine. It is the least we could do to honor the debt, yes, the debt we owe to its people. We say it loudly. The international community stands with you, Palestine. We remain steadfast in our commitment to a peaceful, sovereign, and independent Palestinian state. This historical injustice must be addressed. The scale of justice must be rebalanced. Madam President, we firmly believe Palestine fulfills all UN membership criteria as defined by the founding fathers in the Charter. We urge every member to support this resolution. It is time for Palestine to take its rightful place among the community of nations. Seeking a UN membership is a fundamental expression of Palestinian self-determination. The admission strengthens, not undermines, the two-state solution, a solution constantly under threat from those who seek to erase Palestinian identity, Palestinian aspirations. Peace will come from Palestine's inclusion, not from its exclusion. While acknowledging the challenges, yes, colonization, annexation, violence, and denial of Palestinian rights, our response must be clear. Admit Palestine as a first fundamental step toward peace. This membership will definitely consecrate the two-state solution that the occupying authorities continue to stand openly against. This membership will constitute a rejection of their attempt to erase the Palestinian people and to destroy the Palestinian state and every prospect of peace. Let us welcome Palestine to the UN, and in doing so, relaunch a genuine peace process between equals, paving the way for a lasting peace in the Middle East. Failure to do so, it is, again, a denial of this very Council of its responsibilities. Failure to act is a serious and forgivable mistake. Failure to wake up today is a license for continuing injustice and impunity. Failure to do so is everlasting shame. The call for Palestinian freedom must be heeded. The call for free Palestine, resonating across the globe, must be a reality enjoyed by the Palestinian people. Madam President, I conclude with what the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has stated before the General Assembly last year. And I quote, "The time has come for Palestine to become a full member of the United Nations, even though its territory remains occupied. We will not abandon this cause, and we will not rest until the objective is achieved." I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Algeria for their statement. I shall now put the draft resolution to the vote. Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2024/312 please raise their hand? Okay, will be recorded 12, right? Okay. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to, the result of the vote is as follows. 12 votes in favor, 1 vote against, 2 abstentions. The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to the negative vote of a permanent member of the Council. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements after the vote. I pass the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Madam President. Madam President. Madam President. This day may go down in history as a day when, after three-quarters of a century, the international community at last made the right choice on the path towards correcting the many years of historical injustice done to Palestine and the legitimate aspirations of its heroic people. Because it was a simple question: are the Palestinians worthy of being part of the global family, fully participating in all of the decisions of international life? And a question that we have constantly answered with consent, and when Israel was welcomed into the UN, and when dozens of states also released from the colonial yoke were welcomed into the UN. However, our American colleagues believe differently. Having for the fifth time since the beginning of the exacerbation in Gaza their veto, they have once again demonstrated what they really think of the Palestinians. For Washington, they do not deserve to have their own state. Они лишь препятствия на пути реализации интересов
on the path towards realizing the interests of Israel.
Именно поэтому
For that
Соединенные
reason, the
Штаты
United States
готовы до
is
последнего
ready
закрывать глаза
to
на
the last
преступления
to turn a
Израиля
blind eye to the crimes of
в
Israel
отношении мирных жителей
against
Газы,
the civilians in
не
Gaza,
замечать
not
незаконной
noting
поселенческой
the
активности
illegal
в
settlement building
Западном
activity in West Jerusalem on the West Bank.
Цель –
The
сломать волю
aim
палестинцев,
is to break the Palestinians' will,
заставить их
to force
безоговорочно
them
подчиниться
once and
оккупирующей
for all
державе,
to submit to the occupying power,
превратить их в слуг
to
и
turn them
людей второго
into
сорта, а
servants
может
and
быть и
second-class
вовсе
persons, and perhaps
изжить и изгнать их с
to once
родной
and
для
for all
них
force
территории.
them out of their native territory.
Такая политика дает лишь
That
обратный эффект.
policy is only having the opposite
На
impact.
сегодняшний день абсолютное
At
большинство
present, an
мирового
absolute
сообщества
majority of the
выступает
global
в поддержку
community
заявки
supports
Палестины на
Palestine's
прием полноценной
application
члены
to
Всемирной
become a full
организации.
member of the World Organization.
Страдания мирных
The
палестинцев
suffering
находят
of
отклик в
Palestinian
сердцах и душах
civilians is
миллионов людей по
resounding in
всему
the hearts and minds of millions of people around the
В странах,
world.
снабжающих
In
оружием
countries that
Западный
supply
Иерусалим, все
weapons to
громче
West
звучат
Jerusalem,
голоса
there are
сторонников
louder
запрета
and
на
louder
такие поставки.
voices calling for those supplies to be banned.
Сегодняшнее использование права
Today's
вето
use of the
делегации
veto by
США
the US
–
delegation
это бесплодная попытка
is
остановить
a hopeless
неумолимый ход
attempt
истории.
to stop the inevitable
Результаты
course of history.
голосования, когда
The results of
Вашингтон
the vote,
оказался
where
практически
Washington
в
was
полной
practically in
изоляции,
complete
говорят сами за
isolation,
себя.
speak for themselves.
Потакание самым безрассудным действием
With
своего
the most,
союзника,
playing into the hands of the most
нежелание
irrational
поиска
actions by their
справедливых
ally and
решений
reluctant to find
на
just
основе
solutions
имеющейся
on the basis of the
международно-правовой
existing
базы,
international legal basis
прямой путь к
is a
дальнейшему
direct path
скатыванию в
to
пучину
the
войны,
further
которая
sliding
может
into the
охватить
mire
весь
of
регион.
war which could encompass the entire region.
Если Соединенные
If the
Штаты и
United
Израиль
States and
получат
Israel
выгоду от этого,
benefit from
то только
this,
краткосрочно.
then it will only be in the short term.
При этом Вашингтон
At the same time,
окончательно
Washington
выведет себя за
will once and for
скобки
all remove
миролюбивых
itself
и
from the
уважаемых
list of
государств,
peace-loving and
полностью
respected
разделив со
states,
своими
having
израильскими союзниками
fully
ответственность за
shared
гибель
responsibility with its
десятков
Israeli
тысяч
allies for
мирных
the
палестинцев.
deaths of tens of
Это
thousands
недостойно
of
великой
Palestinian
державы.
civilians. And that is not
История вам
worthy
этого
of a
не
great
простит.
power, and history will not forgive you
Призываем
for that.
Соединенные
We
Штаты
call on the
прислушаться
United
к голосу
States
разума,
to
задуматься о
listen to the
последствиях
voice of
своих
reason, to
решений
think about the
и
consequences of their
безотлагательно
decisions, and
подключиться
to
к усилиям
immediately
остальных
join in
членов
the efforts
Совета
of the other members
Безопасности
of the Security
по
Council
установлению
to establish
немедленного
an
прекращения
immediate
огня в Газе.
ceasefire in Gaza. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation and pass the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Madam President. The United States has worked vigorously and with determination to support Palestinian statehood in the context of a comprehensive peace agreement that would permanently resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Since the attacks of October 7, President Biden has been clear that sustainable peace in the region can only be achieved through a two-state solution, with Israel's security guaranteed. There is no other path that guarantees Israel's security and future as a democratic Jewish state. There is no other path that guarantees Palestinians can live in peace and with dignity in a state of their own. And there is no other path that leads to regional integration between Israel and all its Arab neighbors, including Saudi Arabia. We also have long been clear that premature actions here in New York, even with the best intentions, will not achieve statehood for the Palestinian people. As members of the Security Council, we have a special responsibility to ensure that our actions further the cause of international peace and security and are consistent with the requirements of the UN Charter. As reflected in the report of the Admission Committee, there was not unanimity among committee members as to whether the applicant met the criteria for membership as set forth in Article 4 of the UN Charter. For example, there are unresolved questions as to whether the applicant meets the criteria to be considered a state. We have long called on the Palestinian Authority to undertake necessary reforms to help establish the attributes of readiness for statehood, and note that Hamas, a terrorist organization, is currently exerting power and influence in Gaza, an integral part of the state envisioned in this resolution. For these reasons, the United States voted no on this Security Council resolution. Again, the United States continues to strongly support a two-state solution. This vote does not reflect opposition to Palestinian statehood, but instead is an acknowledgement that it will only come from direct negotiations between the parties. A central focus of U.S. policy prior to October 7, the October 7 Hamas terrorist attacks, was to promote normalization between Israel and its Arab neighbors and, as a critical element of a normalization package, generate tangible benefits and a political horizon for the Palestinian people. This was based on the U.S. judgment that normalization is the most viable pathway to make progress on what had been an intractable situation between the Israelis and the Palestinians. In the aftermath of October 7, conversations on potential normalization and a political horizon for the Palestinians that would lead to statehood and membership at the UN have continued. Hamas and its Iranian backers would probably prefer this effort not succeed, but we are determined to see it through. It remains the U.S. view that the most expeditious path towards statehood for the Palestinian people is through direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority with the support of the United States and other partners. We believe this approach can tangibly advance Palestinian goals in a meaningful and enduring way. We also believe, in light of Iran's unprecedented and outrageous actions over the last week, that Israel's neighbors would stand to benefit greatly from normalization. The United States is committed to intensifying its engagement with the Palestinians and the rest of the region, not only to address the current crisis in Gaza, but to advance a political settlement that will create a path to Palestinian statehood and membership in the United Nations. The United States will continue to oppose unilateral measures that undermine the prospect of a two-state solution. This includes any actions that violate the principles that Secretary Blinken has emphasized for months, that Gaza cannot be a platform for terrorism. There should be no Israeli reoccupation of Gaza, and the size of Gaza's territory should not be reduced. As we have said before, we believe a two-state solution coupled with these elements is the best way to achieve a durable peace in the region, along with security for Israelis and Palestinians. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United States and pass the floor to the representative of France. Je vous remercie, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you,
La
Madam
France
President.
remercie l'Algérie d'avoir proposé cette résolution en faveur de laquelle elle a voté. Il est temps de parvenir à un règlement politique global du conflit israélo-palestinien sur la base de la solution des deux États, la seule à même de répondre aux besoins de sécurité de long terme d'Israël ainsi qu'aux aspirations légitimes des Palestiniens à un État. Comme le président de la République l'a rappelé, la France n'a pas de tabou sur cette question et c'est dans ce contexte l'initiative de l'Algérie que nous sommes favorables au rehaussement du statut de la Palestine à l'ONU et à son admission comme membre de plein droit. Cette admission doit permettre la reprise d'un processus décisif et irréversible pour mettre en œuvre la solution des deux États et le renforcement de l'autorité palestinienne dans les territoires palestiniens, à Gaza comme en Cisjordanie. Elle doit pouvoir y exercer de manière effective et efficace ses responsabilités sur l'ensemble des territoires d'un futur État palestinien. Le conflit à Gaza déclenché par l'attaque terroriste du Hamas et d'autres groupes terroristes le 7 octobre dernier, que nous condamnons de la façon la plus ferme, montre à quel point il est essentiel que le Conseil de sécurité s'engage résolument dans la voie d'une résolution politique du conflit tout en renforçant son action sur le volet humanitaire. Nous continuons ainsi à exiger un cessez-le-feu immédiat et pérenne et la libération immédiate et inconditionnelle de l'ensemble des otages. I thank the representative of France and pass the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Thank you, Madam President. And I wish to thank the delegation of Algeria for putting forward the resolution and for being fully transparent from the very beginning about the approach it intended to take. 13 years after the last request, today another call for justice by the Palestinian people was made, but the Council's response was not enough to deliver that justice. Guyana raised its hand for justice today because, for us, it was the right choice, and it was long overdue. The Palestinian question has been before this Council since 1947. From that time, there have been at least 792 formal meetings of this Council. An examination of those meeting records provided some key revelations about the Council's approach to the Palestinian question, 3 of which I will highlight very briefly. First, over these decades, Council members have, inter alia, acknowledged the need to address the various dimensions of the Palestinian question, consistently stressed the need for the Palestinian people to exercise their right to self-determination, and emphasized the need for the realization of the two-state solution. However, while this shows that the Council has largely been sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, this sympathy has not generated enough political will to achieve a comprehensive, just, and lasting solution to the Palestinian question. This takes me to my second point, Madam President. The Council's historic sympathy for the Palestinian people has led to many band-aid measures to address the symptoms of the Palestinian question. We have not been able to comprehensively address the root cause of the problem, the lengthy delay in the creation of an independent state of Palestine. The resolution we voted on a moment ago was an important step towards addressing this gap, and Guyana deeply regrets that it was not adopted. Without getting to the root of the problem, the symptoms will persist, and the reactive cycle will continue. The people of Palestine deserve a clear political horizon and a path to a comprehensive and just peace. The third issue is the serious lack of accountability that has accompanied the Palestinian question from 1948 to present day. If the occupying power were held to account for its continuous violations of international law, the path to a free and independent Palestine would have been cleared a long time ago. The impunity must end. Madam President, Ghana supports the State of Palestine's full membership of the United Nations and believes that it has met all the requirements set out in Article 4 of the United Nations Charter, which are the only ones to be taken into consideration for the admission of a member into the United Nations. We are therefore deeply disappointed that the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people were not met today. Guyana had hoped that the Council's historic sympathy and apparent empathy with the Palestinian cause could have translated into strong political will this time around, given the existential threat Palestinians currently face. Notwithstanding, Guyana reaffirms its unwavering commitment to continue working with this Council and the entire UN membership to secure justice for the Palestinian people. To the Palestinian people, Guyana will never abandon you. We will continue to use our voice until justice is served. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Guyana and pass the floor to Slovenia.
Thank you, Madam President. Slovenia voted in favor of the recommendation of the Security Council for membership of the State of Palestine in the United Nations. The two-state solution, where two democratic states, Israel and Palestine, live side by side in peace, is the only long-term sustainable option. Slovenia continues calling for full respect of international law and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. And at this point, our main objectives continue being twofold: addressing the current situation in Gaza and resuming political process towards a two-state solution. We are of the view that the membership of the State of Palestine in the UN could significantly support this process, which should address all outstanding issues, support the State of Palestine, and guarantee security for Israel. Membership in the UN is not an alternative to negotiations, but complementary to them. We believe that the UN should play a crucial role in the peace process, and therefore both states should have an equal status at the UN. Madam President, Slovenia is of the view that Palestine meets the criteria set out by Article 4 of the UN Charter. Granting membership in the UN to Palestine could be an important step towards peace. It would strengthen the role of the Palestinian Authority
and would contribute to the security of Israel as well. We maintain our view that Palestine's right to self-determination and UN membership are not contrary to Israel's right to exist and be secure. We believe any two-state solution must be built on mutual recognition and sovereign equality. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia and pass the floor to the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President. It was 1949 when the Republic of Korea first applied for membership to the United Nations. However, it was not until 1991, 42 long years after its original application, that the Republic of Korea given the UN membership. Thus, we can clearly attest to the meaning of aspirations of people to be admitted to these paramount international organizations. Madam President, the Republic of Korea believes that the only viable and sustainable way to resolve the Palestinian questions and establish lasting peace is through the realization of the two-state solution. Yet, for several decades, negotiations between parties have been stalled. The Republic of Korea voted in favor of the draft resolutions on the admission of Palestine into the UN in consideration of our view that renewed and strengthened efforts are needed to revitalize the path toward two-state solutions. Regardless of today's results on the draft resolution, we hope that the parties will soon resume negotiations based on dialogue and compromise for a peaceful resolution of the Palestine question. And to this end, the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza must end soon. We once again call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the immediate and unconditional release of hostages held by Hamas and other groups, and expanded humanitarian aid throughout Gaza. All regional actors should exercise full restraint to avert further dangerous escalation in the region. Under this backdrop, even though today's draft resolution on the admission of Palestine was not adopted, it is clear that all members of the Security Council share the imperative of the two-state solutions as the most viable long-term resolutions to the Palestine questions and the best way to lessen long-standing regional tensions more broadly. It is to be noted that our vote today does not constitute bilateral recognition of Palestine as a state. In the future, we will consider this matter at a time that is most conducive to the resolution of the conflict. We also hope that the negotiations between parties can resume in the near future. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea and pass the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. The United Kingdom reiterates its commitment to making progress towards a two-state solution in which a safe and secure Israel lives alongside a sovereign, viable Palestinian state. We agree that the people of the West Bank and Gaza must be given the political perspective of a credible route to a Palestinian state and a new future. And it needs to be irreversible. This is not entirely in our gift, but our recognition of a Palestinian state should be part of it. We believe that such recognition of Palestinian statehood should not come at the start of a new process, but it doesn't have to be at the very end of the process. We must start with fixing the immediate crisis in Gaza. Gaza is occupied Palestinian territory and must be part of a future Palestinian state. However, Hamas is still in control of parts of Gaza, and Israeli hostages remain in captivity. This shows that we're still at the start of the process. Ensuring Hamas is no longer in charge of Gaza and removing Hamas' capacity to launch attacks against Israel are essential and unavoidable steps on the road to lasting peace. as is working together to support the new Palestinian government as it takes much-needed steps on reform and resumes governance in Gaza as well as the West Bank. We abstained on this resolution today because we must keep our focus on securing an immediate pause in order to get aid in and hostages out, then making progress towards a sustainable ceasefire without a return to destruction, fighting, and loss of life. Our Foreign Secretary has been in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories this week to offer our support towards achieving this. We will continue to work urgently to help bring peace and galvanize a political process towards a two-state solution which provides justice and security for both Israelis and Palestinians. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom and pass the floor to Japan.
Thank you, Madam President. Last month, the Security Council was able to finally adopt a resolution which demands an immediate ceasefire in Gaza in the hopes of bringing about a real change on the ground. However, a ceasefire has not been realized, and the humanitarian catastrophe is deepening. The people of Gaza are facing unprecedented tragedy and hardship. Much of Gaza's population lives in despair with little food and water, deprived of human dignity. In the meantime, serious diplomatic efforts are being made to bring about a cessation of hostilities and release of the hostages. We reiterate our strong support for the crucial role of the United States, Egypt, and Qatar to this end, and appreciate their tireless efforts. Once a sustainable ceasefire is in place, a reconstruction mechanism for Gaza with the support of the international community and the establishment of effective governance by a reformed Palestinian Authority will be essential. Madam President, Japan has strongly upheld the Palestinian rights to self-determination and consistently supported a two-state solution in which Israel and the future independent Palestinian state live side by side in peace and security. We have provided maximum support for Palestinian state-building efforts from political, economic, and social aspects for decades. Our principled position was reflected in our vote in favor of the 2012 General Assembly resolution granting Palestine the status of non-member observer state at the United Nations, and expressing the hope that the Security Council would consider favorably the application of Palestine for admission to full UN membership. Madam President, this is the first time since 2011 that the Security Council has deliberated on Palestinian membership in the United Nations. The intervening years have been marked by little progress in direct negotiations between the parties, whereas most recently we have witnessed escalating regional conflict that has caused untold suffering. At this critical moment, Japan voted in favor of today's draft resolution as a comprehensive decision, recognizing that Palestine meets the criteria for admission to the United Nations membership, while also taking into account the perspective of promoting the establishment of a Palestinian state through peaceful negotiations between the parties concerned. I thank you very much.
I I thank the representative of Japan and pass the floor to the representative of Switzerland.
Merci, Madame la
Thank you,
Présidente.
Madam President.
La Suisse s'est abstenue sur ce
Switzerland
projet de
abstained
résolution.
on this draft
Sans nous y
resolution.
opposer,
Without
nous estimons
opposing
qu'à
it,
l'heure
we believe
actuelle, cette
that at
étape
the
n'est pas
present time,
propice à une détente
it is
de
not
la
appropriate
situation et à une solution
for
pacifique au vu de la grande instabilité
this,
et du
for the
conflit sur
particular
place.
situation, given the
Nous pensons
ongoing
qu'il serait mieux de
conflict.
procéder à
We think
l'adhésion
it
de la
would be
Palestine aux Nations
preferable
Unies en tant que
to
membre à part entière à un moment où
determine
une telle mesure
Palestinians'
pourrait s'insérer
membership
dans la logique
at
d'une
the
paix
United
émergente.
Nations at a
Cette
future stage
abstention ne change
once
pourtant
there
rien
has been
au
peace.
soutien
This
ferme de la
will
Suisse
not
à la solution à
change
deux
the
États.
position of
Nous sommes
Switzerland, our
convaincus
strong
que
position
seule
on
une
a
solution
two-state
négociée
solution. We believe that
de
only
deux
a
États, la
negotiated
Palestine et
two-state
Israël,
solution
vivant
for
côte à côte en paix et
Israel and
sécurité,
Palestine
peut
living side
conduire à
by
une paix
side
durable
in
entre
security will
Israéliens
lead to
et
lasting
Palestiniens.
peace between Israel and
Madame la
Palestine.
Présidente,
Madam
nous venons
President,
d'évoquer en détail
we
la
have just
situation
referred to a
catastrophique
detail
au
the
Proche-Orient.
catastrophic
Ce qu'il
situation
faut
in the
de
Middle
toute
East.
urgence,
What
c'est
we
la
must
mise en œuvre
urgently
immédiate
do
des
is
résolutions
ensure
de ce
the
Conseil
immediate
et du cessez-le-feu.
implementation of this
Et il
Council's
faut, et
resolutions
ceci
and a
sans plus
ceasefire.
attendre, si nous
We
voulons
must do this without
redonner aux
further ado
populations
if
la
we want to
perspective
give
d'un avenir
people the
pacifique
possibility
qui
of a
permette à
peaceful
toutes et à
future
tous de
which will
vivre en
enable
dignité,
everyone to live
le
in
rétablissement
dignity,
d'un horizon
to
politique en
restore
vue d'une solution
political
négociée à ce
and
conflit.
negotiated solutions to this
La Suisse se
conflict.
tient prête à soutenir
Switzerland
les
is
efforts qui
prepared to
peuvent
support any
reconstruire
effort
l'espoir de paix à travers
which
une
will lead
solution
to
à deux
hope for
États
peace
démocratiques
through a
qui vivent
democratic
côte à côte
two-state
en paix
solution, two
à
states
l'intérieur
living
de
side by
frontières sûres et
side within
reconnues
safe
basées sur les
and
frontières de
recognized borders
1967,
based on
y
the
compris avec
1967
Gaza
borders,
comme partie
including with
intégrante
Gaza
d'un
as
État
an integral
palestinien.
part
Je
of
vous
a
remercie.
Palestinian state. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Switzerland and pass the floor to the representative of China.
谢谢主席。
Thank you, President.
主席，
President,
今天是令人悲伤的一天。
is a sad day.
由于美国的否决
Because of the veto by the
巴勒
United
斯坦
States,
成
the
为联合
application
国
by
正式
Palestine
会员国
for
的
full
申请
membership
遭
of the
到拒
UN
绝。
has been rejected.
巴勒斯坦人民几十
The
年的梦
decade-long
想被
dream of
无
the
情
Palestinian
击碎
people，ruthlessly
中
dashed.
方对
China
美国的决定
finds the
感到
decision by
十
the
分
US
失望。
most disappointing.
独立建国是
An
巴勒斯坦
independent
人
state
正
of
几
Palestine
代人的
has
夙
been a
愿。
long-cherished
正式
intergenerational
加入
dream of
联
the
合国
Palestinian people.
则是这一历史
Its full
进程
membership at the
中关
UN
键
is
的
a
一步。
crucial step in that historical direction.
早在
and
2011
process.
年，
As early as
巴勒斯坦就提出了
2011,
申请。
Palestine submitted an application.
由于个别国家的反
Because
对
of some，
安理
countries'
会当时的
opposition,
行动
the
被搁
Council's
置。
action at that time was put on
13年
hold.
已经够久了，
13 years are long enough.
可相关国家
And
还
yet,
在抱
we
怨
still
时
hear
间不
some
够，
complaints
不
asserting
该
that there
急于
isn't
行
enough
动。
time and there's
这
no
种
need
说
to
法
rush into
是不真
actions.
诚的。
These claims are
当前
disingenuous.
与以往任何
The
时
admission
候
of
相比，
Palestine as a full member of
接
the
纳巴勒
UN
斯
is
坦
more
成为联
urgent
合国
now
正式
than
会
ever
员国
before.
都更具紧迫性。有关国家不
The
支持
relevant
巴勒斯
countries
坦成为联合国正式会员
its
国，
inability to
声
support
称理由
Palestine
是
in
巴勒
UN
斯
member
坦国
of
不具
UN's
备
membership
治
is on
理
the
国家
grounds
的
that the
能力
state，Palestine does
我
not
们
have
对
the
此
capacity
不
to
能
govern.
同意。
We do not agree with this assessment.
过去13年里，
Over the past
巴勒斯
13
坦局
years,
势
the
发生
situation
了
in
许多
Palestine
变
has
化，
changed in many ways.
其中最根本
The
的
most fundamental of
是
which
约旦河西岸
has been the
定居点
expansion
不
of
断扩张
settlements，in the West Bank.
巴勒斯坦作为国家
Palestine's
的生
viable
存空
space
间
as a state
不断被挤
has
压
been，steadily squeezed.
两国方案的基
The
础
foundation of
不
the
断被
two-state
侵蚀。
solution has been continuously eroded.
有些国家对此视
The
而不
relevant
见，
countries have
采
ignored
取
this
默许
and adopted
甚
an
至纵容
attitude
的
of
态度。
acquiescence or even
现在
connivance.
又反过来质
And
疑
now
巴
they
勒斯
turn
坦
around
不具
at
备
this
执政
time
能
and
力，
question
这
Palestine's
完全
capacity to govern.
是混淆是非的
This
强盗
is
逻辑。
gangster logic that confuses right and wrong.
更令人不可接受的
What
是，
is even
有
more
关国家
unacceptable
还在
is
质
some
疑
countries
巴勒斯坦
challenging
是否
Palestine's
符合联合
eligibility
国
for
宪章规
membership
定的
of the
会员
UN
国资格，
under the
UN Charter, implying that it still remains a question whether Palestine is peace-loving. Such an allegation is outrageous and a step too far. For the Palestinian people who are suffering under occupation, this is tantamount to rubbing salt in their wounds and extremely insulting. If it is out of political calculation to oppose Palestine's full membership of the UN, it would be better to simply say so, instead of making excuses to re-victimize the Palestinian people. President, the establishment of an independent state is an inalienable national right for the Palestinian people. This cannot be subject to any questioning or bargaining. The relevant countries make direct negotiations between Palestine and Israel a prerequisite, claiming that Palestine's membership at the UN can only be the result of negotiations. This is putting the cart before the horse. There is claiming clarity of Israel's rejection of the two-state solution. Against this backdrop, the admission of the state of Palestine at the UN as a full member would allow Palestine to enjoy equal status with Israel and would help to create conditions for the resumption of negotiations between the two sides. All countries that genuinely support the two-state solution should not stand in the way of Palestine's full membership at the UN. President, the wheel of history is rolling forward. The trend of the time is irresistible. We are convinced that the day will come when the state of Palestine will enjoy the same rights as other members of the United Nations, that Palestine and Israel, as two states, will be able to live side by side in peace as neighbors, with the two peoples, Palestinians and Israelis, living in tranquility and happiness. China will continue to make unremitting efforts and play a constructive role for the early realization of that day. And thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China and pass the floor to Ecuador.
Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam President.
Histórically, el Ecuador ha respaldado al pueblo palestino en su legítimo derecho de tener un Estado libre de ocupación extranjera y ha apoyado los procesos que conduzcan a su autodeterminación y a la independencia plena, de acuerdo con los principios fundamentales del derecho internacional y la Carta de las Naciones Unidas. El 24 de diciembre del 2010, el Ecuador reconoció a Palestina como Estado libre e independiente con las fronteras de 1967. Posteriormente, en 2012, el Ecuador copatrocinó y votó a favor de la resolución en la cual la Asamblea General concedió la condición de Estado observador para Palestina. Y desde el 2014, Ecuador mantiene una embajada en Ramallah y Palestina mantiene una embajada en Quito.
Has an embassy in Quito.
Hoy,
today,
una vez más,
once again,
el voto del Ecuador ha demostrado su
Ecuador's
compromiso
vote has shown
con el
its
pueblo
our
de Palestina,
commitment to the Palestinian
reafirmando
people,
el reconocimiento que
reaffirming
hicimos
our
hace 14 años.
the recognition of Palestine that we made
hace
14
votos
years
para que
ago, and
pronto
our
se den
country
las
hopes
condiciones
that
que
in the
permitan
very
que
near
este
future the
Consejo
conditions will exist which will
recomiende la
enable this
admisión de
Council
Palestina
unanimously
como
to allow Palestine to become a full-fledged member of the United Nations. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ecuador and pass the floor to Mozambique.
Madam President, Mozambique commends the presidency of Malta for convening this meeting to take action on this historic draft resolution on the admission of the State of Palestine to the United Nations. We extend our deep appreciation to Algeria and to the entire Arab group for their leadership in tabling this text before the Council. Madam President, on August 12, 1988, the Republic of Mozambique formally recognized the State of Palestine as an independent and sovereign state. We did so because of our deep belief that peoples are born with the inherent right to self-determination, independence, and sovereignty. This right is deeply anchored in the Charter of the United Nations, in the principles and norms of international law, and in the natural law itself. It is a right that does not depend on a plebiscite or referendum, or for that matter, on a judgment of other alien peoples or governments. It is therefore on that basis that we, Mozambique, as many other nations in the world, were born and entered the concert of nations. We were admitted in the United Nations family in September 1975 after 10 years protracted liberation struggle. We wish to remind that as of today, April 18, 2024, 140 United Nations member states have extended their recognition to the state of Palestine. This quasi-universal recognition is a testament that Palestine fulfills the requirements of statehood that include population, territory, government, and the capacity to engage into relations with the other states. We consider that conditions are ripe for Palestine to be a full member of the United Nations. Under Article 4 of the Charter, and on the basis of our record since 1988, Palestine is clearly a peace-loving nation. Throughout the years, it has demonstrated its acceptance of the obligations contained in the Charter, and it has shown the ability and willingness to carry out those obligations contained in the Charter, as we said. We wish to state that Mozambique entertains diplomatic relations with the state of Israel. This is the foundation on which we embrace the vision of a two-state solution, of two independent and sovereign states, Israel and Palestine, both as full members of the United Nations, coexisting as good neighbors, living side by side in peace and security, as prescribed by the Charter of the United Nations and by the relevant resolutions of the Security Council and the General Assembly. This is in particular fully in line with the United Nations Security Council Resolution 242, unanimously adopted by this Council on November 22nd, 1967. These are, Madam President, the reasons why Mozambique has voted in favor of this draft resolution. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Mozambique and pass the floor to Sierra Leone.
Madam President, I thank you for convening this meeting, and we commend the Presidency of Malta for the manner in which it has conducted the work of the Admission Committee and the Security Council on the important application for admission to membership of the United Nations by the State of Palestine. I also thank Algeria for submitting the draft resolution and their leadership in the Council regarding the plight and aspirations of the Palestinian people. In the high-level open debate on the Middle East-Palestine question, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Sierra Leone this morning elaborated on our position on the issue. That is, in the context of the request for the admission of the State of Palestine as a member of the United Nations, 13 years after Palestine's application was first considered by the Security Council Admissions Committee. Sierra Leone, it said, recognizes the basis for such a request, which in our view is legitimate and could create the pathway to a political horizon founded on the principles of a two-state solution based on United Nations General Assembly Resolution 1812, which recommends for an independent Arab and an independent Jewish state, and in line with Article 4 of the UN Charter. Sierra Leone supported and voted for the draft resolution for the State of Palestine to be admitted as a member of the United Nations. Our support was in line and within the context of our esteemed consideration of Article 4 of the UN Charter and the guidance provided by the International Court of Justice in its 28 May 1948 advisory opinion on conditions of admission of a state to membership in the United Nations. We regret that the draft resolution was not adopted. We have the firm view that membership would have resonated with the principle of equality of states as enshrined in the UN Charter, and certainly would have strengthened the two-state solution with an independent Arab and an independent Jewish state living side by side in peace, security, and stability. The state of Palestine membership at the United Nations may have been delayed, as often in regrettable periods of injustice. But as the arc of the moral universe, which may be long but bends towards justice, the UN membership for the state of Palestine cannot be denied. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone and pass the floor to Algeria.
Madam President, again, on behalf of the Arab Group, of the OIC, and the non-aligned movement, and also all peace-loving